Hello, welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. My name is Aisha Hollingsworth Thomas, and I will be your guest host for this video. I want to talk just a little bit about what the heck is going on in Sudan and why haven't we heard more about it. So let's see. All right, so just a quick little takeover of the Progressive Soapbox again. No one was really talking about it. Jamarl hadn't covered it, and I think it needs to be talked about. So I'm going to try to take a little deep dive into, or a shallow dive into what's going on in Sudan. A couple of weeks ago, June 3rd, I saw some things posted on social media, more so Facebook, talking about a massacre that happened in Sudan. The military killed some people or something, and I didn't know anything about it. It wasn't on the news. Jamarl wasn't really talking about it, and so I tried to kind of do some digging to see what happened. And so on June 3rd, in Sudan, the military did open fire. The military council opened fire on peaceful protesters. But it goes back a little bit farther than that. Of course, there's some backstory. So I tried to figure out what the hell happened, how we got there. So I'm just going to share with you what I found because I think it needs to be talked about. And the more research that I did when people said, how can I help? What can I do about Sudan? Hashtag blue for Sudan. They said, talk about it. Unfortunately, it's not getting a lot of media coverage. And so I think they said that if Western government was pressuring their government more so, then maybe they would be forced or be more inclined to reach an agreement. But I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. So in December 2018, this guy, Omar al-Bashir, was the president of Sudan. He'd been the president for 30 years. And he decided that he was going to impose emergency measures to try and prevent an economic collapse. The economy wasn't doing too well. And he said, okay, I'm going to cut bread and fuel subsidies to try to prevent this economic collapse. And the people protested. They took to the streets. There's a lot of backstory behind it. I've got a link down in the description box below of a young lady who used to work with Vice. It's a podcast, but she talks about the history of the country and what led up to this for 3 years. But essentially, this event that took place, the massacre on June 3rd, came as a direct result of this implementation of these emergency measures in December. So he implemented these emergency measures. People took to the streets to protest. They protested, again, this was in December 2018. They protested, and on April 6th, the protesters occupied the military headquarters and were demanding that Bashir be removed from office. 5 days later, on April 11th, the military announced that he had been overthrown. He was removed from office. Great. Woohoo. Yay. That's great. So now what? So because the military had taken over, the protesters then began to protest because they were demanding that power be given back to the civilians. The protests were originally organized by an organization called SPA, Sudanese Professional Association. It was made up of doctors and lawyers, and these were the individuals that kind of headed the demonstrations and the protests surrounding the demand for Bashir's removal. So once he was outed or ousted, however you want to say it, once he was removed from office, the military, of course, then took control. Protests continued. They wanted the power given back to the civilians. They created, the protesters, something called an Alliance for Freedom and Change, and they began talking to the head of the military, and that was the Transitional Military Council, the TMC. So they talked, and they were in negotiations to try to talk about, well, what's going to happen with the country now that Bashir's out of office? What are we going to do? So they began talks, and they decided on May 15th that they were going to, of course, implement democratic elections, and they were going to allow 3 years before those elections were going to take place. Some of the articles that I read said that they wanted 3 years because Bashir's people were so entrenched in the government that it was going to take that long to kind of get his cronies out. So they wanted 3 years. Now, the day that the massacre happened, TMC, which is Transitional Military Council, decided to squash all agreements. They were demanding that, or they had decided that elections were going to be held in 9 months, that 3 years was too long. And they attempted on June 3rd to try to remove the protesters from the square in front of the military headquarters. And this was pretty much where the protesters were set up. I'm trying to show you a little bit of video. Pretty much where the protesters were set up. And somehow, some way, reports are a little bit unclear, they opened fire on the protesters in an attempt to clear them from these headquarters. I've read about 5 or 6 different sources on this, and they go from dozens of people were killed. I think that the TMC actually agreed that it was around 30 people who were there, say that it was over 100 people. And they're saying that the TMC actually, doctors are saying that it was more closer to 100 because they actually removed some of the bodies and threw the bodies in the Nile River. So that's why the reports of the exact number are conflicting. But it seems like a more honest number may have been closer to 100 people that were killed. Following the massacre, I'm going to take you to the article now. This is just a image of the protests leading up to the massacre. Let me see if I can get this on the widescreen. Nope, something weird's going on here. I'm not going to mess with it. Technology. Gotta love it. All right. So, all right, let me take you to the article so I can give you a little bit more than just my synopsis. All right, so this, of course, is in the description box below. This is a BBC article. I couldn't find any U.S. Good reports of what was going on in Sudan. So this is a BBC article, and they're talking about what you need to know about what's going on in Sudan. Sudan is in the midst of a political crisis after security forces opened fire on pro-democracy protesters in the capital of Sudan called Khartoum. Representatives of the protesters have been in talks with the military over who would take control following the ousting of longtime President Omar al-Bashir. Negotiation collapsed when a military crackdown on June 3rd left dozens of protesters dead. Dozens. The army said that it had scrapped all agreements with the opposition, which was the Alliance for Freedom and Change. That was the protesters. They said they scrapped all agreements with the opposition and that elections would be held within 9 months. That means that they completely went back on the 3 years that they had previously agreed on. But the protest movement insisted a transition period of at least 3 years was needed to ensure elections are free and fair. Like I said before, much of the country was then shut down. They were worried that, again, that al-Bashir's kind of people or people loyal to al-Bashir were too deeply involved in the government, and that, a shorter time frame wasn't going to be sufficient to make it truly democratic. So they wanted the 3 years to kind of transition and get all of those people out and have fair elections. So another big thing that I heard about, and I'm lucky because I have friends, I don't catch everything, and, I watch the Progressive Soapbox, of course, and I didn't hear this on the Progressive Soapbox. I'm not going to say any, I'm not going to call anybody out or anything like that. But I'm just going to say I did not hear this story on the Progressive Soapbox until now, which is why I'm here, because I said I wanted to talk about it. I thought that it should be talked about. But anyway, one of the other things that some of my friends who were kind of plugged in to international news were talking about was this huge internet shutdown. So the story goes that the article says that the country was then shut down by an open-ended strike called by the opposition. So this were the protesters. After the massacre, they said, we're going to strike. Complete civil disobedience is what they called for. Amid the deadlock, an envoy from Ethiopia was brought in to mediate and said talks between the two sides could resume soon. Now, somewhere in the midst of this, and this is what I'm not finding the date for right now, so I apologize because I think I dropped the other article from the screen, but they shut down the internet, and they had reporters that were sending text messages to try to get news stories out. Of course, the military said that it was a matter of national security why they shut down the internet. But let's be honest, I'm sure that it had something to do with the fact that they had just slaughtered a bunch of innocent protesters, and they didn't want to spread that all over the World Wide Web. So let's see if we can find out exactly the date for the internet shutdown, because this is what really got me into, all right, what the heck is going on in Sudan? Because I heard about the massacre, and then a couple of weeks later, somebody said something about, the internet. There's an internet shutdown in Sudan. And it's kind of weird because you're thinking, can they shut down the entirety of the internet? That's not something that here in the States I could ever fathom. But they did. The TMC, which is the military, shut down the internet. There was a story that came out. I'm going to tell you about this because I do remember that. I'm going to try to find the article about the internet shutdown. But there was a story that came out either today or yesterday, and the headline said one man in Sudan was given internet access. And I was like, okay, so how the heck did that happen? And my first thought was, okay, well, this is the bad guy. This must be somebody that was working with al-Bashir or something. I mean, like, what's going on? Why did he have internet access? And it's actually a funny story. Maybe not funny, but I thought it was interesting. Funny, however you want to put it. But he says, this is a lawyer in Sudan, and the way that he got internet, he actually sued the internet provider because on the grounds that they did not give just notification before they shut the internet off. So based on that, he was allowed to access the internet. So one man, this was 6 hours ago. So this was today. One man is reported to have internet access in Sudan. Now, a lot of people are hacking, or some people are hacking. So I've seen reports of people who are still able to post on social media or get stories out. One of the reporters said that he found a hotel that had a landline that allowed him to text message. So he was sending reports over text message to people in UK to get the stories out. It's chaos. It's chaos. But people are hacking to get into the internet. But this guy sued and won, and he now has internet access. But it's just for himself, because he took it to the court or whatever and said, they did not give me fair warning that they were going to terminate my internet, and he won. And so he has access. But he has said that now he is going to go back. They say that he has a date tomorrow and the day after to try to get more individuals in their internet access back. He says his victory is only benefiting him so far, as he filed the case in a personal capacity. Of course, the internet was cut off after security forces violently dispersed protesters camping in central Khartoum. That was on the June 3rd massacre. He said, and this is Mr. Hassan, he said he's currently the only civilian in the country able to access the internet without resorting to complicated hacks. Can you see this? I can't bring it up in the big window. Jamal's system is doing weird shit, so I have to kind of have it here. So we'll work it out. He said he's currently the only civilian in the country able to access the internet without resorting to complicated hacks. He said he's going back to court on Tuesday to win the right for more Sudanese people. He says we have a court session tomorrow and another one the day after tomorrow. Hopefully 1 million people will gain internet access by the end of the week. So I thought that was kind of interesting, kind of funny. But he says that it was due to the fact that the operator failed to provide written orders to disconnect the internet. So this guy in Sudan has internet access. So far, he's the only one. So, yeah, it's not being talked about. Some of the people, again, said that June 22nd, I don't know if you saw on your social media, but I saw on mine and I changed mine as well. A lot of people on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram changed their profile pictures to just a blue image, and they used the hashtag Blue for Sudan. And this was done to try to raise awareness and try to get people talking about what the heck was going on in Sudan, because it's not really in mainstream media as far as I know. I was talking to a family member earlier and I said, yeah, I think I'm gonna do a show tonight on what's going on in Sudan because I haven't heard it, I haven't really heard any updates on it. And she said, well, what the heck is going on in Sudan? And she watches this channel. So clearly it wasn't talked about on this channel until now. But we're going to talk about it today. I can't say why it's not being talked about. I saw a tweet that I thought was interesting where a gentleman said the reason that we're not hearing about Sudan in the United States is because the victims are Black, the victims are Muslim, and the victims are in Africa. I don't know. Take away what you want to from that. I think there may be a little bit of truth in there. I'm getting a buzz, so I think that means there's a Streamlabs. So I'm going to refresh this thing. All right, I see. Do I have to read this out loud? I guess I have to read this out loud. All right, so somebody named Must Be Aliens says, or somebody named Must Be Aliens says, it must be aliens in Sudan playing Star Trek chess. I don't even know what the hell that means. Star Trek chess. Okay. Jamarl Thomas says, you're doing a great job, honey. I'm so happy we're married. I'm so happy we're married. Can we have tacos for dinner? Tacos and cuddles. And can we watch the 1990s Spider-Man cartoon? I love you, honey bean. I don't think that's really my husband. I don't think that's really Jamal. He doesn't call me honey. I don't know what the hell some of this stuff is. Tacos. We did talk about tacos for dinner. This other shit, I don't know what this is. I don't know if I'm being trolled or what. It's kind of funny. Yeah, but whoever it is, thank you for the $2. I don't know if we have any super chats. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that's about all I got. I think it's important. I love when I see people. Okay, so right now, of course, everybody knows we're in the age of social media. And I don't watch the news every day. So I think it's kind of helpful. And I think it's beneficial to me when I have friends and family who are posting and sharing things on social media that are important and not just cat videos and dog videos and Star Trek chess. So I like to see it. There is an influencer that posted about Sudan, and I gotta be honest, I heard some stuff about it and I was interested, and my girlfriend asked me some things about it. But the thing that I like was she did a post about it. She changed her profile picture to the blue, #blue for Sudan. But then immediately after that, she posted 2 articles about what do you need to know? What the hell is going on? And then more importantly, what can you do? And so I was like, okay, well, let me look at this and see what's going on. I mean, she's kind of like a YouTube celebrity, so it's got to be important. I'm gonna go check this out. So I have to be honest, it was beneficial, but social media, man, we're ruled by, if you're a subscriber to a channel, if you follow these people, you put a certain stake in their opinion. And so it carries more weight when you see them post it, more weight than me just kind of perusing articles and saying, that's interesting. So shout out to the people who have those platforms and talk about things that are real and important and get the news out like this, because like I said, I don't know if I would be that curious if it wasn't for her posting that and then posting the articles, because sometimes people are just lazy. I hear, oh, something happened in Sudan, that's a massacre, oh, that's so sad, all right, I'm gonna go on over here and do this. And a lot of people aren't going to do legwork to try to figure out, well, what's going on in Sudan. So when you're in that position and you talk about it and then you post reputable sources so people can just click on it and get the information, it's really helpful. So what can you do? I think this is like the 3rd time that I talked about it, but I think what I'm doing now is probably, the most that I can do, which is getting awareness. There's a link in the description box below for a young lady who was on a podcast from this kind of alternative progressive media outlet. I think they're based in the UK. But she is Sudanese and she worked for Vice. And she talks about, it's like an hour and a half long podcast, but she talks about how she was in her car, or she's a journalist. Well, clearly she's a journalist, but she's a journalist, and she was talking about how she was in Sudan, of course, in Khartoum, and she was in the back seat and her cameraman was in the front seat, and they see the military convoys. And she, they have all this equipment. I guess it's in the trunk or something because nobody sees it, but they have all this equipment, but she decides, I'm going to use my cell phone. I'm not going to take out the camera. I'm just going to use my cell phone. So and this is in the midst, I believe, of the internet shutdown. And so she gets out her phone. They're driving in the car. They're not protesting. They're not on the street. They are driving by the military convoy. And she puts her phone up and is recording. And she says, I'm getting great pictures. Oh man, this is awesome. I'm getting this and I'm not getting in trouble, da da da. And then all of a sudden they get approached by the military. And she says it becomes physical and they are like kicking in the glass towards her and like banging on the car and they're trying to get inside. The door gets open and one of them is like yanking on her shirt and they keep telling her, you were filming. And she keeps saying, no, I wasn't filming. I promise I wasn't filming. And she said they're like shaking her like a rag doll. They're holding on to her shirt. Like, it's getting really violent. And then she said she looks up and they've opened the door to where her cameraman is, who was driving in the front seat. And she says that they are, assaulting him. They're punching him. They're hitting him. And she says, I look up and they're beating the hell out of him. And I realized, okay, so she had two phones, I guess. But she says she took the phone that she didn't just get finished recording with. I guess one that, I want to say a burner phone, but I don't think that's what it was. It was just like a secondary phone that she had. And so because she saw him kind of, getting beat up, she was like, okay, well, here's my phone. Just take my phone and go. Just take my phone and go. And she's telling the guy that's interviewing her that right at that moment, something happened, like something came up on a loudspeaker or they got something happened that made them just completely walk away from them and leave them. And the guy was like, do you know how lucky you are? You got, like Saved by the Bell or whatever the hell it was, but something saved their asses, because she was saying that this is how much they're trying to shut down media. They're trying to kind of keep it dark and keep what they're doing quiet. So she is on Twitter. The article that I shared below has 3 people that they recommend that you follow on Twitter. And then one of those people had this document, and this document is in the description box below. It's Sudan Uprising Master Document. This is a Google Drive file that someone has created. If you can read it, it says, hello all, this is a working master document with links and resources to inform yourself of what is happening in Sudan and how to support. It's constantly going to be updated with relevant sources, funding initiatives, petitions, letters, etc. The idea is to centralize as many resources in one place so that people can have a strong source to come back to. If you can see at the top, the last update was 6/21, so it's just a couple of days ago. It's also meant to be collaborative, so that if people have more resources to share, I will add it to the document. So email me, that's the email address there, and identify what kind of source you're sharing so I can organize it in its respective place. Thank you to those who are making the effort to stay informed and act in true solidarity with this pivotal movement. So the link to this is in the description box below. It's got some resources, some news articles. I think probably everyone that I have linked below is also in this article. And then down at the bottom, I thought that this was kind of interesting because this is of course targeted towards us here in the States. But there is a letter, a template that you can send to Congress that's asking them to, let's see. Hello, my name is blah, blah, blah. Concerned about the current state of violence and military suppression in Sudan, I urge you to support an increase in funding to medical suppliers and civilian relief groups that aim to protect innocent civilians who are currently living without access to adequate medicine, shelter, food, nor internet access. I also strongly advise you to highlight the culpability of nations such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, who have sent over $3 billion in aid to the Transitional Military Council that is terrorizing innocent Sudanese children, women, and men. And then they give some stats in this particular letter, if they were going to send this out, that says that in the past week, at least 108 demonstrators have been killed and at least 600 wounded since security forces stormed a protest camp in Khartoum last Monday. That's June the 3rd. Violent attacks erupted in other parts of Sudan, including home invasions, violent rape. That is something else that I heard in the, or that I read in some of the articles, that along with the massacre on June 3rd, there are reports, many reports actually coming out about sexual assault. And this letter seems to be backing those claims, including home invasions, violent rape, and disposal of dead bodies into the Nile River, perpetrated by security forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces. They go on to say that the Rapid Support Force and Janjaweed coalitions are responsible for these atrocities and human rights violations. Hospitals are overcrowded and do not have access to enough sterile equipment, medicine, bandages, and gauze, and trained staff. Another thing that I heard was that the military was actually attacking and harassing doctors. They were going to hospitals. Some of the people were talking about there was a time where the hospital was like a safe space, where you could go and not be harassed by opposition, I guess by military, by, whoever it is. But they're saying that that is not the case in Sudan, that this TMC, the military coalition, is actually harassing doctors. And there have been reports of them going to hospitals and, kind of terrorizing the staff there. The last thing that they said that has happened in the past week is that the internet and cell phone networks have been restricted or cut off, so survivors cannot reach out or expose their current state of destitution and fear. So that is what's going on in Sudan. Please check out this, if nothing else. Take a look at this, the Sudan Uprising link that is in the description box. They have some resources for funding if you'd like to donate. This is the one that I was looking. Where is it? This is the young lady that I was talking about. Yusra, I'm not going to mispronounce her name, but it's this young lady right here. She was the one that was the Twitter page that someone referenced before in the article. And she was, if I'm not mistaken, this was the young lady who was on the podcast as well. So if you go to her Twitter page, which is here, you'll see the podcast, Jake somebody. And it's an hour and a half long, and it is an Apple podcast, but they do have a link to an alternate source if you don't have Apple like myself, because I am a Google person. I do not subscribe to the shenanigans of the Apple industry, or whatever you want to call it. So, all right. So I see shenanigans happening in the chat. So I'm going to check these before I leave. It looks like it's just Jamarl that has nothing else better to do besides give money to say random shit. So he says great job, so thank you for that. I'm reading the super chats. He says something about balls and testicles. He does ask a legitimate question of what should America do if more killings follow en masse? Should we use force to protect the population? I think that's how the United States gets into all the shit that they're into right now. Because we want to be global police, world police. One of the things that I saw was that the military, they did mention that they kind of brought in a mediator from Ethiopia to try to give some common ground, come to some agreement between the military coalition and the people that were representing the protesters. One of the things that was mentioned was that if Western and countries like Saudi Arabia were putting more pressure on the military council, that they would be more inclined. And in the letter you saw that they said that $3 billion in aid was given to the military council. So I'm not sure that I believe that United States should get involved. They could talk about it at least. I don't know what's being said from the U.S. government. I saw a statement, was it from Bolton? What the hell is that guy's name? Dun, 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 dun. Let's see. Because the United States did come out and like issue a statement. All right, so here's an update. What has the international response been? Most African and Western countries have backed the protesters. No surprise there, to me at least. Saudi Arabia has urged discussions between the two sides, but not directly condemning the military violence. Along with UAE and Egypt, it perhaps fears the protests could inspire similar events to take place on their home turf. The TMC's vice president, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, he flew to Saudi Arabia last month to meet the crown prince, promising to stand with the kingdom against threats and continue sending Sudanese troops. So this looks like it supports what the article or what the letter in the article said about Saudi Arabia backing the TMC, which is the military force. The African Union, or the AU, has suspended Sudan from its membership until a civilian-led transitional authority is established. The UN is removing all non-essential staff from Sudan, but China and Russia have blocked moves to impose sanctions. The U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, so I was right, condemned the Khartoum violence, calling it abhorrent. That's all that I've been able to see. They talked about how bad the massacre was, but I haven't seen anything about the U.S. and what their stance regarding involvement is. If I see something about that, maybe I can give an update, but so far I haven't seen anything about the U.S. getting involved in this. Like the guy said before, they're African, they're black, and they're Muslim. So unfortunately, they're not on the top of the important list for a lot of individuals. And I love the Progressive Soapbox. I love my husband, but even smaller media outlets are led by and focus on more important or more interesting or more relevant topics, because when you get into the conversation of why isn't what's happening in Sudan being covered, is it affecting us? Is it affecting the United States? Venezuela's talked about, but that's because, we have relationships and that's actually going to affect us. What's going on in Sudan, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, is not affecting us here in the United States. So it is not getting enough coverage. Sir Bikes a Lot Day, thank you. He says, thanks for shining light on this in San Antonio, Texas. So I think that's all that I've got. Let me check Streamlabs because I saw some stuff come up on the screen. I'm not reading these out loud. Okay, this one's actually kind of funny. This is how he ends up doing these videos, and they're like 3 hours long because something like this comes up and sparks another conversation. So the hat of Jamarl Thomas has given $2. And just for the record, if you guys can see these monetary amounts, I would just like proof of this in this video. I would like all of this money returned to me or given to me directly at the end of this video. If it is given through Super Chat and or Streamlabs, based on my efforts today here to enlighten and educate you, the people, about what's going on in Sudan, I would like to receive my money, Mr. Jamarl Thomas. Thank you. And please, but the $2 for this comment from the hat of Jamarl Thomas, he says, I always see you hanging out with Jamarl. Well, I get lonely on top of his head all by myself. Will you please think about buying a hat for yourself so you can wear it? That way, when you kiss me and your hat can also... That way, when you kiss me and your hat can also kiss. Thank you. I have a big head and I have a lot of hair, so that's not going to happen. I can do like a wrap or something, but that's probably as close as it's going to get. The rest of this just looks like Jamal's trolling us because he doesn't have anything else better to do. So maybe he will be back later for another video here on the Progressive Soapbox. But for now, that's all I got. I just wanted to come and talk about what the hell is going on in Sudan and give some insight on what could possibly, what you could possibly do to aid and hopefully help them find some resolution and some peace and some internet access in Sudan. So thank you guys for watching. Like Jamarl says, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the work through Patreon, PayPal, Streamlabs, as long as you're not trolling. And I might be back. Maybe not before Jamarl, but I will be back and I will see you then. Thanks so much. And I hope you learned something. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.